Child abuse can change a child's trajectory. Cumberland County is tackling adverse childhood experiences head-on. I'm Anita Brown-Graham. This is NC Impact.
NC Impact is made possible by funding from Civic Federal Credit Union and is a public media North Carolina production in association with the University of North Carolina School of Government.
Cumberland County is pioneering a community child abuse prevention plan. Its leaders are focused broadly on what's called adverse childhood experiences, like neglect, abuse, or any potential harm to a child.
The Shania Davis case, probably the most recognizable case that we've had in the last 10 to 15 years here in Cumberland County. Shania was a 5-year-old little girl. Shania was abducted from her mother's home. She was taken to a hotel in Sanford about an hour away where she was sexually assaulted, and then the defendant, Mario McNeil, instead of bringing her back to her home, killed her and discarded her body near Sanford. Unfortunately, what we determined is that it was a case of sex trafficking. The mother had willingly given over Shania for the purposes of sex to repay a debt that she had owed the defendant. When thinking about what she went through during those couple of hours that she was abducted, sexually abused, and then murdered, it was just heart-wrenching. It's certainly a case that will stick with me my entire career.
I always say the shelf life for a good youth services detective is probably less than 5 years because it bothers you so much. And because we've never talked about it. You know, we didn't make any change, but I think that we are now. I think our eyes are open, as hard as it is.
The formation of the community plan started early 2016. I think it was in August. The conversations started in 2013. We were watching the rates of child abuse and neglect go up and more children ending up in foster care. We have 27 or 28 community organizations that are involved that come to the table.
There is some good that came from this terrible incident. I know that Shania's family feels that way, that there's awareness brought to this issue. Hopefully it prevents other situations, and also it helps get justice in other situations where something terrible like this occurs.
Educators play critical roles in identifying child abuse and getting help.
The Resilience film is a documentary that deals with adverse childhood experiences and their effect on children. And as far as the school system, when we saw it, we decided this has to go to as many groups and as many families and as many teachers as possible.
Some of the big takeaways are school staff have watched this film and they're now thinking about how can I show up differently in my classroom and what are specific things that we can put in place to help students. Sometimes when you are looking at the behavior of children, it's important to ask what happened to you rather than what's wrong with you. We've had a social worker who implemented a reset room at one of our middle schools, and that is kind of a chill out room that when kids realize that they're having a rough day and they need to just kind of chill out and regroup, they can go to this reset room that's at Max Abbott Middle School.
We feel like empowering parents to be our partners is key for us to work as a stronger community and to realize that that child is at the center and we all have to kind of work together to make that a better place for the children. We've had parent groups and meetings, and we've come together and worked in teams. We came up with a work group that met monthly to talk about the different resources that were available in Cumberland County. And a lot of us would know about one thing, but maybe not know about another thing. So coming together and meeting regularly to build upon our resources and share and work together and being a resource for the community.
We have to prepare our students because at some point we are going to sit down and these young people are going to be taking on the jobs that we have and the roles that we have, and we need them to be as healthy as they can possibly be so that they can contribute their piece to society.
Educators may be part of the solution, but parents are most important in prevention. Let's examine how parents are being taught about adverse childhood experiences.
Things start at home. Everything starts at home for a child. The Triple P program, or Positive Parenting Program, is an internationally acclaimed evidence-based educational and support program for parents and caregivers of children and adolescents.
I think people think that, well, these kids are going to reach out to teachers and they're going to reach out to people that they trust, but they just don't. They've been told so much what happens in this house stays in this house. So these victims are very different than anybody else in the community because they don't have anybody.
A lot of times parents are faced with behavioral or emotional issues with their child, and they may not even be aware of some of the signs or some of the triggers or some of the tools or strategies that can be used to not only identify those issues, but then to correct those issues. It really is an attempt to further change the culture as it relates to those home environments, making sure that they're nurturing and that they're as conducive as possible for the successful development of children and adolescents in our community.
I really believe over the last 10 years that I've been involved in it that we have seen a culture shift with some entities, some groups that are beginning to recognize, and so I think there's this awareness that's on the ground floor. Hopefully that's about to rise up and become even bigger in our community.
We're approaching it from many different angles, and Triple P is just another angle or another tool, if you will, that our communities will be able to use as we attack that issue.
Visit unctv.org/NCImpact.